Welcome again to another Novela Watch event. Today, we've got a nice crowd.
Yeah,
Novela! All right, and it was in the rain, so I'm very impressed. So everyone, welcome. This is now 10 years, actually almost coming up on 11 years of Novela Watch events in Miami. And we've known each other like, what,
12 years.
Oh, geez.
2014.
All right, there you go.
Yeah.
It's been a while. So we've been doing events together, and I'm really excited to do another. Before I get to that, I just wanted to thank a few people. One, I wanted to, of course, thank the Moore for hosting us again. We've done now a few events here at the Moore, so this is just another in a long line of great events that we've hosted here. Also wanted to thank your crew. Usually I get more involved in logistics, but CJ and the other people in your group, so there wasn't really much for me to do. And last but not least, thank you, Chris, for coming down from Boston and joining us.
Woo! Yeah.
I'm gone. Oh, Jesus. Okay. So one of the big things that we do is we like to focus on education. And what I really like about doing these events with Chris is that he's so knowledgeable about watches in general, but specifically independence. And so today it's all about independence. We're gonna dig digging a little bit into the brands that were here, but also why is the independent movement so important? Why has it gotten such much press? So, Chris, if you don't mind, I'll jump right in.
Yeah.
And
sure. Before you do that, I want to say thank you to Daniel. This is our 5th straight year that we do this or some kind of an event together in Miami. So this is awesome. I think this is like our biggest turnout. So thank you to all of you for coming and attending and braving the elements. So I was hoping I'd get a little sunshine coming from Boston, and that didn't happen. So I see I brought the rain with me. So thank you. But thank you for coming. This is awesome. A lot of new faces, a lot of familiar faces. So I really appreciate it. And I'll give you a brief intro on who we are, what we do.
Yeah.
So brief intro. My name is Chris Daboul. I'm the founder of EsperLuxe. We are an authorized dealer for about 13, 14 independent watch brands and watchmakers. I started this company in 2019 out of my studio apartment in Boston, and it's since grown little by little. And we have a brick and mortar up in Boston, but we are also well established here in Miami with a lot of our clients down here. CJ, where is he? CJ? CJ?
Yeah.
CJ is right over there. He's Director of Client Experience. He's all the way in the back, but he doesn't like to show his face often. But Director of Client, he's based down here in Miami. So, for all our clients that we try to service them, we try to provide a certain level of concierge level of service and experience and education, and of course curating by bringing incredible pieces from people that really poured everything into what they do. So thanks again, Daniel. Please.
All right. Great intro there. I have to say a couple of things extra though that come to mind, and one is that usually we like to focus.
I got it.
Usually we like to focus on on the brands, and it's very rare that I work with someone like Chris, because we usually don't deal with authorized retailers that much. But what he does is so special because he's finding great brands, independent brands, introducing them to the U.S., and the curation that he does, I think, is really, really top notch. And I think you'll see that if you go and see the pieces that he has. So for me, it's always an honor, and it's really special.
Oh, thank you.
For me, it's always an honor to have it because I know I'm going to see really cool things that you're never going to see anywhere else, and I know we have a few pieces like that tonight. But I thought I always like to start with education and history. If I could talk just a minute about how we got to the point where independence became such a big deal, because and we were chatting about this a little bit, and I think you have a different take. I had always thought that it was because in the early, let's say 2010s, there was a lot of consolidation in the industry, Richemont, Swatch Group, etc. And there was this backlash against it. We got all these small brands that were kind of reacting to that, and that's how we started the independent movement. But I'm kind of curious, what's your take on why did we get this explosion of independent watches?
I think there were probably maybe 3 or 4 inflection points, right? When we talk about indie watchmaking, like independent watchmaking, it's a very nuanced term, but I guess we focus on the indies, right? The ones that are making less than 1,000 watches a year, give or take. Most of the brands and watchmakers that we work with, I would say averaging around 250, 300, something like that. Some a lot smaller. Some make 10 watches a year. Some,
compared to $1 million a year for Rolex.
Exactly. So to give you perspective, but in the mid '80s, there was this academy that was created by 2 watchmakers, which kind of became sort of this incubator for independent watchmaking. And at the time, there were all these incredible watchmakers, but they worked for brands and they had NDAs and they weren't able to kind of showcase the stuff that they did. And so these two guys, Sven Anderson and Vincent Calabrese, created this academy in '85, '86, and it slowly grew, right? And so I guess that was like the foundational point for it, for indie watchmaking. And so they fostered, they helped, cultivate, new watchmakers that wanted to create and to showcase their stuff. And so they would show at Baza World, like a tiny little space.
Yeah, they used to put them in that tiny room in the back.
Exactly. And then I think in the 90s as well, what we started to see is kind of the comeback of high complication watches, right? For a while after the quartz crisis in the 70s and 80s, like that died. And so people wanted complications again. And with that came these independent watchmakers that were doing that. Fast forward to the 2010s. Now we want to talk about how this kind of became a little bit more mainstream, right? How did independent watchmaking kind of come out there? Because before then, you had these watchmakers that would come up, do the subscription model, right? Jorn did it in '99, and then he was making a few tens of watches every year, and eventually he grew by taking on investment. But what changed? What changed from having like these core following of collectors that were supportive, right, to what we see today, which is a lot more eyes, a lot more visibility. I think for me, from where I sit, it started in the mid 2010s. We started to see some auction results. So the auction game was always real with Patek and Rolex, but it was never a thing with independent brands. And we started to see we started to see some things with some results with Philippe Dufour, he's like a very small independent watchmaker, but he started to show some big results. Jorn, a little bit later in 2017, 2018, we started to see some big results. I was present in 2019 at the Only Watch auction, which I think was really the biggest inflection point for this, because we saw some crazy numbers. For the first time, one of Jorn's watches went for $1 million. It's the Only Watch auction, which is a charity auction. A lot of unique pieces get donated for charity, and that's when Jorn's Astronomic went for $1 million. We saw the most expensive wristwatch ever sold at that time, the Patek, Grandmaster Chime. Thank you. And we also saw, in the meantime, Kari Voutilainen go for big money. This was another new independent watchmaker. The Urwerk de Bethune collab go for big money. It was like 400. It went for 400,000. Recep Recepi now steps into the scene. We were looking at 600,000. That started that sort of the next step for what we see in terms of independents gathering more big steam. And then COVID happened, and everything just went crazy, right? And so I think auction pricing, a strong collector foundational base, the establishment of secondary market for some of these brands, whereas now a lot of these brands have a robust secondary market. Okay, it might not be super expensive, but in the past there was no comps, so people really didn't know. At least now you have an idea for comps, you can see what it's like, and you can determine, okay, this is like, I can manage with this. Maybe I don't lose 70%. Which, by the way, 15 years ago, you walked into a jour, or whatever, 10 years ago, you walked into a jour boutique, you were losing 70 cents on the dollar when you walked out. So that's changed a lot, significantly, not just for Journe, but for a lot of other brands as well. And so today, I think what we're seeing. Yes, please.
Question.
Yeah.
You think the rise of YouTube also influenced?
So bingo. The last point that I was going to add is social media. Social media has just changed everything. Starting with Instagram again in the 2014, 2015s, and now it's just it's poured additional fuel on the fire where there's so much more visibility. But I will also say there's so much more information available for people, at any second, any minute, that now it feels like if you're an upstart watchmaker, you just reach out to a handful of guys on Instagram, and all of a sudden, you've got a brand, you've got a subscription, right?
Yeah. So I want to touch base on that because now we've got all these new brands that are coming out.
Yeah.
And I think you got
new watchmakers or brands.
Well, watchmen,
Sure. Okay.
they're not quite brands yet.
Okay.
But what's interesting is you got to think back in 2010 when we get this wave of the independent movement, they were really pioneers. They were taking a big risk. A lot of them were making almost all the components, which was something new. It was a very different play. Now there's a model that's been proven. There's a lot of independents who have been successful, and a lot of people are jumping on the bandwagon. At least that's how I kind of see it. And I'm curious. When you see all these new brands that are popping up, one, you're very careful about what you carry. How do you choose? And two, what's the longevity on those other new brands?
So look, there's when you buy something that's new, there's always a risk, right? And so I've been in it long enough that I've kind of created this I've kind of created a formula. I actually have a formula now. Initially, it used to be when I used to go out and used to look for a new brand. It was an instinct. I like the product. Yeah, I vibe with the guy. Yeah, okay, let's do it. Now it's kind of changed for me because I said to myself I can't go off of that. I need to have a formula. So I have a points formula where I apply values. I look at product. Product is king. Product is always going to be king, right? Product is king. I look at vision. I look at brand identity. Right? Is the philosophy in line with the product? Is that being communicated in the product? Because if they're telling me one thing and they're giving me the whole story, but then I see none of that in the product, it doesn't make any sense. Distribution to a certain extent, I think it's more relevant to brands rather than smaller watchmakers. But I would say one of the things now that matters is who's behind, who's buying it, right? Where is it placed and what retail stores, but also which collectors are getting behind. And then lastly, service. That's also, and by service, I don't just mean servicing the watches. I mean what kind of communication you have. And look, some are better than others with that stuff, and that's why I've got a half a point that I apply to these things, and there's a couple of other things too. And then if it doesn't meet a certain number, I don't bring it on board.
What's interesting about what he's saying is I'm an attorney. I do corporate and art law, and in the art world, the way we look at an up and coming artist is we ask almost the same questions: who's collecting them, where are they shown, or who's representing them. And it's funny; those are kind of the same optics that you would look for in a star. But I guess it makes sense.
And by the way, I think one of the things that's happened since COVID is it's a rat race, unfortunately, and it's one of the things that I don't like because you can't take your time anymore. You can't evaluate things like you want, and a lot of people are having to buy sight unseen, right?
Yeah.
And so. That's good and it's bad. It's good because there's so much demand for some of these, independent watchmakers now, but it's bad because, who wants to...
Guys, help me out in the back. Thank you. To follow up on that point, what about the fact that, can the market sustain all these brands? Or is there going to be a shakeout?
So look, the market's always right? If there's a transaction happening and there's people buying, the market is what it is. It might not be the case tomorrow, it certainly wasn't what it was yesterday, right? So I think it's all relative to the time. And we're looking at 10 years ago, and we're like, holy smokes, like we were asking ourselves the question, oh, like is this brand going to survive? And look at it now, like they're 10 years later, they're celebrating 20 years anniversary. Like, so ultimately you gotta. One of the most important things that I continue to tell people when they're looking at stuff is you gotta love it. You gotta really you gotta love it. You gotta love what you're buying, right? That's certainly above all else. That doesn't mean you buy stupid, right? That doesn't mean you just throw your money away and light it on fire, But with our formula, like we've been for the most part right about a lot of brands, but we're never going to be 100%. I expect that at some point, like one of the brands is not going to perform or something's going to happen, right? It's just the reality. And I think if you want diversity in your collection, if you're at that stage in your collection, which by the way, you might not be, and that's totally okay too, because having stalwart brands like Rolex and Patek it's also great too. So,
do you think that most of the independent collectors are people who started at Patek and Rolex? And
a lot of we see that. We see it's a progression. It's a progression of the collecting journey.
Yeah.
A lot of faces that I'm looking at, here that I know started, early on. Early. Do you have questions? Yes.
We'll get to you in a minute.
Started with Rolex and Patek and AP and event, and they found maybe a Lange or they found some high-comp Patek, and that opened the door to something else. They discovered independence, and now they're deep down the rabbit hole. That's where I live.
Still collect those brands.
And they still some of them still collect those brands, right? So
it never really ends. It's just that what you're looking at.
This isn't a what's better. This is not a what's better conversation.
Right.
This is a what appeals to you conversation. And, in this world, the identities are a lot more pronounced, right? The creativity is a lot more pronounced. The originality is a lot more pronounced. It's a small niche market, but the diversity is incredible. I mean, it's so great. Like, there's so much.
You've come a long way with independence when you have a 20-minute story and 60 minutes about an independent watchmaker.
Yeah.
It's a pretty telling story, right?
And I will say this too, it is the best time for independent watchmaking.
Truly.
The quality of product is unbelievable. The access to information is great for people to be able to find it. We talked about the secondary market. There is comps in the market for almost everything, even the rarest of rare stuff. If it sells, you might know a dealer that knew something about a watch that sold, and you might have an idea on price, or at the very least, the auction. The auction market is you don't have to listen to me. Just go to Philips and look at all of their recent results recently, and all the independent watch brands that they've been selling.
And I think it's important that the other cool thing about the independents is a lot of times the founders are still alive.
Yeah.
So when
when
we do events like Armin Strong, and we can have them at a club come, we get the person, and you can ask the why instead of just knowing the what and the storytelling. And that's kind of where I want to kind of end up on storytelling before we kind of talk about some of the stuff that you brought tonight.
Yep.
How important is the story when you're selling an independent brand?
To me, it's very important. For some people, they may just be product focused and engineering focused, and that's great too.
Yeah.
But for me, it's all storytelling. It's all about creating. It's all about connecting the emotion to the product, because there's a lot of product out there, and you can buy product, but it might be completely devoid of any nuanced meaning, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, the story is very important.
Chris, what was the first watch you ever were either gifted or you put? Go back to your childhood. That first watch. What was it?
I think it might have been like a Casio G-Shock.
G-Shock's a solid choice.
Yeah, I still remember that. Yeah.
And how did it make you feel?
But that was my dad. I got into this business because of my dad. We worked together on the wholesale side, as distributors and agents for.
I hear the why.
Yeah. So we worked together for a little while, for about 2-3 years.
How was that?
I learned so much from him. He had been in the business for many years, overseas, and unfortunately, due to circumstances, we kind of lost everything. And then, my parents moved to the U.S. And I moved to the U.S. too. Originally, we're Lebanese.
Lebanese,
Yeah.
okay.
So, and then they moved to the U.S. in 1997. I was 10. So like really, this is an American dream, like American dream story. They still exist, by the way, if you're wondering. They still exist. So and so he got back on his feet, and like they actually opened the restaurant. So became very successful, and he got the itch to get back into the business, and that's how I got into the business. Yeah.
So you're an independent who represents independence.
Yes, that's right.
So was it the Casio watch or was it another
No,
watch?
I think the watch that sticks out to me, it's an unknown because it was an unknown back then. But he had this watch. It was called a Lucien Rochat, and it was like an Art Deco two-tone with like the simple 7750 Valjoux movement chronograph, but it had a beautiful moon phase indicator. And it was almost like it had these indicators that were also in gold, which is beautiful. And I always remember that watch because when he'd take me to school, I'd hold his hand, and that's the watch I would see. And so that I love that watch. That watch stays in my mind a lot. And it was a very small maker like way back then. It was not meaningful for anybody else probably.
But
to
that's
me,
the
it's
value.
Yeah.
That's why I think.
and I have that watch. That watch is in my safe. So yeah,
And now it has a story.
yeah, it's a story. There you go.
So it goes back to storytelling. I wanted to talk before we wrap up and open up to other questions about some of the pieces you've got here. I know we have Urwerk, Morris Grossman out of Germany. We've got Armstrong. We've got Arnold and Sons. We've got Debatu.
We brought like some of the best stuff that we've ever had. Like this is probably the best inventory that we've had since we've started the business. So it's like a great time to be able to see a lot of this stuff. And you'll see it, like every brand has its own identity. Like it's so different from anything else. Like you'll see very little overlap, in terms of aesthetics. But also tonight, Phil, where are you? So Phil Ogle, who's my very good friend who I've known for a long time, and if you guys want some stories about where independent watchmaking was and where it's today, Phil's the guy to talk to. But Phil is the president. What is it? So Phil is the president in North America for Urwerk, and also a new brand that was just announced yesterday called Dominique Renault. And so we've brought a Dominique Renault watch, which just launched yesterday, to be able to show you guys here. This is the first time it's publicly been seen aside from any embargoed environment. So this is a really cool thing.
I think, and I want to add to that, and Phil, I don't know if you want to say a few words, but we did an event with Phil and Urwerk last year. It was great. It's great to see you again. Thank you for joining us. This is a very special piece because, like he said, no one's seen this in the flesh out in the open. This is the first time, and we're really happy to have Phil and the team here. So thank you again.